Hi there, this is Heather,
And I'm Bryn.
and we're Pharmacists Out of the Box. And today we have an amazingly interesting guest. We're so happy to bring her to you. I think you're going to really enjoy what she has to share with you. I think it's really important that we all kind of listen to her. Her name is Patty Taddei-Allen. And I know Patty because we worked together at the University of Florida for a little while. And so I got to know her, but I didn't get to know enough about her. And now that I've kind of learned more, she's really interesting. So she got her bachelor's degree at the University of South Florida. We'll forgive her for that. And she got her doctor of pharmacy, though, and her master's, her MBA at the University of Florida. And then since then, she's board certified in, is it ambulatory care? Yes, ambulatory care and the geriatric certification. That's right. Mm-hmm. So we'll maybe get her to share more about that as well. But thank you, Patty. Anything else you want to share, Bryn, about Patty?
I found it funny WellDyne, where she works, when you go on their LinkedIn page, I was like, oh my goodness, that's my friend Allison. So I messaged her because we graduated together. I'm like, is it your twin or you? Like, where are you right now? And she laughed. She's like, yes, that's me. Apparently, I think you gave her flu shot last year.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Small world, people. This is what we teach our students. Like, pharmacy is a small world.
Yeah. Yes, it's very, very small. I'm at WellDyneRx, which is a PBM, and we had this kind of initiative where they took a bunch of pictures of all the employees of both our Florida office and our Colorado office to use that for our website. And so you'll see on there all those pictures. They're not fake actors. Those are our employees, from pharmacists to member services to finance, accounting, all of the different departments, kind of represented on our website there. So.
That's very neat. I kind of like that perspective that a company is using their own staff and who they are to represent them. That's wonderful. So how did you even get interested? Because I saw you also had past like community pharmacy type experience for years.
Yeah. So I started off in community pharmacy. I am still passionate about community pharmacy. But I worked at CVS at a retail pharmacy for about 10 years. What was great for me is that I was at the same store for all of those 10 years. And it was a store where I was an intern there, then I was the grad intern, the staff, and then I was the pharmacy manager. And it was a great experience. I value everything I learned while I was there. I felt like one of the skills you really learn in community pharmacy is how to quickly problem solve, because you have to be on your toes all the time, because you never know what you're going to get. You never know what kind of questions you're going to get, or also what kind of issues you may have to deal with. And so I value that time. But then it got to a point where it was no longer conducive to my happiness. As many other community chains, there's been a lot more focus on metrics, and sometimes I called them made-up drama. So metrics that maybe don't really have a lot of value, right? So I'm a results-driven person. I like hitting metrics, but when it's a metric that doesn't mean anything or I can't see the correlation between that and improving patient care, or even that and improving, financial metrics, then I don't understand why I was always failing, even though I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I shouldn't be failing every single day, all the time, in all of my metrics. And so I chose to leave that as a full-time position. And then I just still kind of floated, and I was, as with Heather, I was working at UF as a regional coordinator. So I was doing that while I was also full-time at the community pharmacy. So I've always loved students. I've always loved teaching. I've always loved training, and I love training other students and really providing that kind of mentorship, because they also teach me, right? They keep me on my toes, they keep me up to date, and I have to make sure that I know what's going on, currently, and stay up to date, so that I don't sound like an idiot when I'm talking, to the students. So I've always kind of had a little foot in academia, which I really enjoy. But after I left there, I actually went and did a site visit at WellDyneRx. It was one of our sites where students were doing a rotation there. And that's I didn't know anything about managed care. I almost say that I stumbled into managed care, because I didn't even know that existed, right? That was a place for pharmacists to go, that there were so many different areas to work within managed care, that a pharmacist can really use their clinical skills, even though you may not always be talking to a patient. And so that's how I met my current boss, is by doing that site visit. You know, and then it's almost like networking, right? So then it's like, hey, we have a position, would you be interested? And it just kind of started from there. Then I was the queen of part-time. I was part-time at WellDyneRx, part-time at CVS, and then part-time doing the UF regional coordinator position. And then my WellDyneRx had a large increase in member count for one of their larger clients, and so they were able to then justify bringing me on full-time. And the way I started in managed care was in prior authorization. So I was in the prior authorization department doing the clinical reviews, assisting with developing the criteria for the drugs that would be coming to market, or updating the prior authorization criteria. And then we would also work on developing, you know, any of the newsletters that would be going out. We also did some kind of claim review. We called them MTM Light, but it wasn't really MTM. Not like we think about it as a Medicare. But this is all self-insured groups, commercial plans, no Medicare. And so what we would do is we would do a claim review for, you know, diabetes. We could identify that based on drugs, and then make recommendations. Hey doc, did you know your patient doesn't have a statin, or recommend, you know, review to see if maybe a statin is appropriate, and kind of try to close some of those gaps in care. So I did that, and then I became manager of clinical operations. So then I ran the prior authorization department. The prior authorization department is made up of technicians and pharmacists that help review all the clinical kind of criteria. And then from there, I was promoted, and I transitioned into a different role, which is what I'm currently doing as Director of Outcomes Research. And so as Director of Outcomes Research, I do a lot more than just outcomes research. So in that position, I started a residency program at my organization. So I started a managed care residency. I have pharmacy analysts, and so we build reports to try and identify prescribing and utilization patterns of drugs. I write the drug trend report, where I look across our entire book of business, identify the top therapeutic categories, identify what drugs are shifting within those categories, and then try and explain why those things may be happening. Was there changing guidelines? Is a drug falling out of favor because of side effects, etc. I also do I review claims data for current clients and potential clients, and trying to identify where there may be some mismanagement, or where they're letting drugs that may not be appropriate go through, or drugs that are hyperinflationary that had they been with us, they wouldn't have had those drugs adjudicated, because we would have blocked them. So it's really interesting, because I'm still using a lot of my clinical stuff, even though I don't really talk to patients, as part of my position. And so one of the things about managed care that I think students assume is that if you're in managed care, then that means you don't want to talk to patients. And that may be true, but then there are other positions within managed care. So within specialty pharmacy, you're talking to patients all the time. We have a diabetes and a respiratory program where we have our diabetes specialists and our respiratory specialists. They talk to patients all the time. They're part of that kind of case management. So even though they're in an office, they're still kind of interacting and talking to patients on the phone, doing counseling, doing a video chat with them if they want that, or doing it on the phone. So managed care is not just you're in an office, squinting and typing away, although sometimes that is me where I'm doing that. But it's a lot more than what you think. And they're like, but you don't use your clinical skills. And I say, I use my clinical skills all the time, because I have to know all the clinical stuff in order to come up with recommendations, or to develop a program, or to identify where are some potential opportunities to help bend the cost curve. And so if you don't have that clinical knowledge, then you're still using that all. That's why I still keep up all my board certifications. I need those things in order for me to really be kind of ahead of the game and to stay current.
Wow, that is a ton of hats that you wear. That is amazing. How do you stay structured, or are there certain apps or tools that you have to use in your life? I mean, that is a lot of stuff to maintain. I'm like blown away.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just what I do with WellDyneRx, right?
Right.
Right. And so I also recently started, Aspen RX Health is this organization. It's a startup where it's almost like Uber, right, for pharmacists, where it's based on what you want to do, but you can counsel patients and do the CMRs for Medicare patients. And you follow all the rules for Medicare, but you, as a pharmacist, you get paid, when you complete it, you get paid your $40. And so you're the pharmacy doesn't get it. It's you get that money. So that's how I've been able to kind of talk to patients again, because through that, and it allows me to kind of have some of that patient interaction and talking to patients and counseling them and trying to identify any issues that they're having. But as far as how I kind of organize my life, that's a great question. Everybody asks me that, and I don't quite have an answer other than if I didn't have my calendar, if it's not in the calendar, it doesn't happen, right? And so but I do have a work calendar because there's so many meetings or things that happen within my work calendar. And then I also have a shared calendar with my husband on Google where we have it on the phone. And if it's not in that calendar, it just doesn't happen, or, something doesn't work. So basically it's the calendar is my thing.
So it's Google and then a work version of that calendar?
Yeah, the work on Outlook, just because
Outlook.
I have it all linked. I'll link to that. But just in a day-to-day, I use OneNote a lot for my work. And so I have different notebooks, and so I'd like to do my to-do list. When I have a meeting, I always take notes in a meeting, and I then just take it in OneNote, and then I email everybody directly from OneNote, the notes from the meeting, what are our takeaways, what are the follow-up items. So it makes it much more convenient instead of having to then go back to your desk and then trying to remember what did we talk about at the meeting, who's going to do what. And so I like to kind of have that within, it's in an email somewhere, and it's usually you can find, because I have like a folder for all my OneNotes. That way I can go back and look at that. So when it sends it and it comes into my inbox, it automatically goes to a box. It doesn't clutter all my other email.
Nice. And then when do you fit in the Aspen? Is it like one of those like, oh, I've got a downtime between this meeting, or is it?
No, I don't typically do it during the day, because I'm usually just during the workday. I'm usually booked solid, whether I have a meeting or I have to have a deliverable that I need to get done, or I have to do an analysis, and then I always. You try to schedule in emergency time, because there's always sometimes a fire, or, hey, can you please look at this? I need some help with this, or whatnot. And so I typically only do Aspen usually in the evenings or on the weekends. And so I'll, allot about an hour and a half of time where, that's my block of time. And if I can make a call and connect with someone, that's when I do it. And if not, then it just doesn't happen. I'll do it another time.
I really love what you said. I think I've been in managed care, and, when you're in the managed care world, it just seems kind of natural. But I think as a pharmacist, I didn't really understand the prior authorization world. We all just kind of thought, oh, the patient's complaining because they tried to get that covered, and the mean old insurance company said no.
Right.
And so since I've been in the managed care world, what I was always just blown away by is what you're saying, that in the prior authorization world, I think this is important for all the other pharmacists out there that aren't in managed care. When I have patients that I kind of guide through that process of, like, maybe you talk to your doctor about getting that covered because they're like, this is the only thing that works. And doing a prior authorization, I always let the patient know as well that who is making that decision with the insurance company is not just somebody who's just a business person, that in managed care, when they go through that prior authorization process, that is actually a pharmacist, a very knowledgeable pharmacist looking at all of the data out there, helping make that decision. So I feel confident. I always share that with the patients. I think I didn't do that before because I had no idea who was in that process. So I think that's important that you shared that.
So when criteria is developed, it's based, so at our organization, and then many others are modeled this way, it's a group of clinicians. So it's usually a group of pharmacists, or in some other organizations, there may be nurse case managers or medical directors or doctors. And so it comes to a consensus, you present, here's what I propose as the criteria. And then once that internal committee kind of approves it and says, yes, that makes sense, at our organization, we still then present to an independent P&T committee made up of physicians and 2 pharmacists, and they say, yes, that makes sense, that is reasonable, that before you would go to this drug, you should try and fail this other drug. So for example, so we actually have chosen to prior auth all GLP-1s in diabetes. The main reason is that there's a lot of misuse about that. You'd be surprised how many docs want to prescribe that for pre-diabetes or just for weight loss. And so when we have our clients, a lot of our clients are self-insured groups, that's not an insurance. That's, this county government is paying for this prescription drug for their employees or their members. and they don't want to cover obesity treatment, or that's just not a covered benefit. But if a doctor is writing it for Victoza, then, you wouldn't know that unless they had to provide the diagnosis code. And so, we probably deny, I think our denial rate on GLP-1s in general is about 20-25%. So there's a lot of inappropriate use potentially, and those drugs are $700 or so list price a month. That's a lot of money that may not be appropriate, or they go straight to that without ever trying metformin.
Right.
And so, the guidelines specifically state metformin. There's so much data on metformin. There's no reason why someone shouldn't at least try metformin.
Right.
And so this criteria is developed, from a clinical perspective. Cost is not involved in the prior authorization criteria from a clinical perspective.
Well, and that's the other thing I loved about managed care once you got into it, because again, I think there's this vision of, insurance companies or managed care, all they care about is money for themselves. And I really know that that's not true, that, the reason you have a formulary, the reason you guys have a P&T committee is to make sure money is saved overall. And then that includes the patient's copay or the patient's premium, right? And copays. And so I love how managed care kind of gets you away from that little pharmacy where you're only hearing, the patient's complaints, or what you're only getting such a snippet of information, where when you get in managed care, you pull back and you get the big picture of like what is coming down from government and the guidelines, like what is the movement of pharmacy in a big picture, and then how do we you guys take that information and then make it usable down to the patient level. So I love it, and that it gets you from way up there down to the patient level. You get all of that in there. I love that.
Yeah, I really enjoy managed care because you're kind of, like you said, you're looking at it from a 10,000 foot view, right? Like you see all these other kind of things that interact in order to, to reach to what's actually happening at the pharmacy. But I value my time in community pharmacy because I know this decision that is made here, we're going to put a quantity limit on this drug. I know what that's going to mean. I know the conversation that someone is either a pharmacist or a technician is going to have with the patient at the pharmacy. So how do I ensure that the message is the clearest and the concisest it could be to relay that same, information, so that it doesn't warrant a phone call that is going to answer the same question.
Right.
That is so interesting. Now, when you did your MBA, did you do that at the same time as your PharmD?
Yes, so I did. I went back to school. So what I did was, I felt like I was really good clinically covered, right? So I did kind of a stock where I looked at what are my, from a professional kind of development. So I always want, it's almost like a roadmap or a strategy. Like, what do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish in the next year or 2 years or whatnot? What is it that I felt that I, had really good grasp on? What is something I needed to learn? So sometimes it was, I want to get this board certification in ambulatory care, because I think that's going to be a very, strategic move down the road. It's going to help me set apart from other, providers. Same thing with my geriatric certification. The reason I chose that is really also because of stuff I was learning in my MBA. The largest growing patient population are the baby boomers. And so those are going to be geriatric pharmacies. So where's there going to be such a need for pharmacists? It's really going to be in the geriatric population. And so that's why I got my geriatric. Plus, it was also kind of an extension of ambulatory care. So there is a lot of overlap between those two. So that's what I found to be kind of from a, thinking about 5-10 years down the road, what do I want to do with my career, where I want to go, what would be nice to have. That's why I chose that. But by the same token, I felt like I was pretty good clinically, but I wanted to go back. I'm like, I don't really know financial stuff. I don't really understand, P&L or profit and loss statements. And I have a general understanding, but I don't really know. So that's, at first I thought I might maybe going back and just getting a master's in like pharmacoeconomics or something like that, because I did find that interesting. But then I realized, I think it'd be better for me to go back and just get my MBA and have a much broader understanding of just the business world, from, negotiations to marketing to understanding value propositions, et cetera. And so I went back and got my MBA while I was working. And I really think that's a great idea to go back and get an MBA while you're already working, because you're able to then do and apply the things you're learning in class to your job. And so, which I think is a benefit than some students who maybe do it before they actually enter the workforce. It's not that it's bad. It's just, I think it was more valuable to me to be able to really apply those things. And also when you're in class, and they're teaching about something, you can say, oh my gosh, I remember this one time we're at my job and had this happen, this would have been different, or this is why that happened. Whereas if you don't have that work experience, it's much harder to try to contribute to that conversation about examples of where you may have seen this somewhere else.
That is so true. I think that's even true with like going through pharmacy school, like maintaining a technician intern type role was very helpful. So
well, I did that too. Yeah. When I was going through pharmacy school, so I was still working at that store. And so I really love that because at least I knew what some of those drugs were, and I didn't have, I was like, well, I remember Advair, and I remember Advair is an inhaler. So I know that's what that is. And I know it's usually twice a day. So maybe, I'm sure this is what the answer is. So it was helpful for me at for my career to work, but I've always been someone who likes to stay busy. And so, if I don't have things to do, I am much less productive than if I have a slew of things to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I like keeping busy and I'm never really bored. So.
Well, and I mean, you're such a role model, Patty, because you have a family. How many children do you have?
I just have one.
Just my one, that's enough.
Yeah.
My first one was huge. She was like 5. But you have a family, and yet, you're not sitting at home right now. You're off somewhere working.
Yeah.
And you're able to juggle that, a job where there's a little bit of travel. And you also, I love, because I think there are a lot of pharmacists that struggle with, should I get that certification? Should I do that? There's a lot out there that we can do, but I think I love the way you direct our audience. That you were thinking about what is ahead. I love how you're like, okay, how can this in the future help me? Not today, maybe, but how can I look at the bigger picture and like, oh, the MBA, oh, the geriatrics. So I think that's really good for our audience too, because I think a lot of them struggle with, what do I get? There's so many options. So.
Right. But it's got to be something too that you're very interested in and that you're passionate about.
Right.
So, I am not a critical care or hospital pharmacist, because when I went through rotations, and to this day, I'm just not a fan. Like, it doesn't strike interest in me. And I want nothing to do with the TPN. Everybody does. I just have no desire to ever figure that out again. And so it's important to do what you're interested in, because if not, then you're not gonna like it.
Very true. What do you do for self-care? Because it's a busy life. Do you have a rigorous self-care?
I don't know that it's a rigorous self-care. So what I do is I take adult ballet classes and jazz classes, and it's great because we also have we have recitals at the end, right? My little pirouette. So we do recitals at the end, and it's through I do it at Patel Conservatory, which is part of the Performing Arts Center in Tampa. And so they have adult beginning ballet and intermediate ballet. And I actually started doing that I've never been a dancer. I started doing this in my mid-30s because I was like, I've always wanted to try ballet. Why not? And it was a great, it's a challenge that has nothing to do with my job or my career. And it's just a challenge for me. And I'm not competing against anybody else. I'm competing against myself. And so I keep getting better every time I get to go. And I go at least once or twice a week to those classes, and they're in the evening. So it's very, doable. So I have my husband is a very supportive spouse, and, we're able to kind of really work together in order to make sure that we're all still fulfilled and like you said, practice that self-care. So I do that. But then as a family, we go to Disney a lot. Like, we have annual passes, and we go at least once a month, sometimes twice a month. My husband works every other weekend. And so we're very protective of our weekends together. And so, what we love to do is to go to Disney World. And so we love staying at the different resorts, and we bop around, and we like going to all the different parks. And I know everyone's like, oh, but it's so crowded. I'm like, it's okay. We got our 3 fast passes. We have it down to a science. We hang out at the pool in the morning. Then we go hang out in the afternoon just for our fast passes, and then we go back, and it's a great time every time. So, do you sleep? I do. I'm trying to get more sleep though, because I typically only sleep between 6 and 7 hours a night. But that's usually during the school year. So in the summer, my daughter doesn't have to go to school. She doesn't have to get up as early, so I get an extra hour of sleep in the summer. So I really love the summer because I get about an extra hour of sleep. Yeah.
That is awesome.
Well, thank you, Patty. I think this is really interesting, and I think, a lot of us, in the pharmacy world don't always get a view from inside managed care, and we kind of have our perspectives that we throw out there based on just little experiences that we have through different eyes. So I really appreciate it. I think this is hugely valuable. And I do know there's a lot of students that are starting to get more interested in managed care. And I know there's a couple of organizations now, or at least one I know of, AMCP has a group for the students on campus. So I think there is a movement to kind of get more information out to younger pharmacists about managed care. And I was going to ask you one final question. I know we got to wrap up. The residency you created, is it accredited yet?
No. So what you'll find is in managed care, most residencies are not accredited. So if you go to the ASHP site, there's like 3 or 4 managed care residencies in all of the United States. And I think the only one currently accredited in Florida is at WellCare. Although I think maybe Health First may have gotten back to getting accredited. But you'll find that most of them are unaccredited. That's just kind of what the status quo is. And so you'll have to, if you go to the AMC website, they list all the accredited and non-accredited. But as I create my my residency, I follow the guidebook. So it's exactly like an accredited residency. I just we just have the ability to kind of tailor it to what is, what the resident is really more interested in.
And I love that. I want to repeat that. I want to repeat what you said, because students really look at accredited, and accredited has a ton of value. We all know the benefits. There's extra benefits for having it accredited. But for managed care, and that includes MTM, so there's medication therapy management residencies. I think there might even be specialty pharmacy residencies.
Yes, there are.
A lot of those are not accredited, and it's exactly for what you said. And I agree. We did the same thing at UF. We followed the accreditation process, like just the activities and kind of the format, I guess I would say. So that we still felt like we were giving it that quality stamp, but yet, like you said, it allows us just to take that student, and if that student really wants to focus more so on the prior authorization, not that that would happen, but they're like, oh man, I love prior authorizations, then we can tailor, it gives you the freedom to tailor that to that specific student, or kind of open up the experience.
Right. And I mean, in managed care, it's all about networking, honestly, right? It's a lot about understanding, having experience in some of these organizations. So to get your foot in the door somewhere else, if you've done a residency, that's why. So some people, it's why you want to do a residency. Do you want to do a residency so that you can sit for board certification earlier? Is it because you want to go work at a VA system? Because I'm pretty sure VAs, they don't care, you need to have an accredited residency. So it just depends on what is it that your career goals are. If your career goal is to get into managed care, to be a clinical account manager with clients, to be a prior authorization pharmacist, to do case management within the disease state, those are more like you have to know someone else or have to have had some experience in order to kind of get your foot in the door.
One more question. One more question. And so that takes me to somewhere else I think we need to highlight as well. What is the opportunity for growth like in managed care? Like, so do you take up out, or? That's
one of the it's one of the reasons I love managed care. Is so that was another. So within like community pharmacy, so there wasn't much room for growth, right? You hit the pharmacy manager. That was pretty much it. Like, it was much more difficult to get into a district position or a pharmacy supervisor position, and that you're really just managing people. There wasn't really anything clinical associated with it. Within managed care, because you're kind of in a corporate environment usually, there is a lot of different growth. There's lots of different departments, and there's lots of different pathways you can go. And you do go up, so I'm at a director level, then there would be, like an associate VP, and assistant VP, and then VPs, and then senior VPs, and there's all these other, but even below that, there's associate director, there'd be senior managers, senior directors, there's lots of different levels that you are managing people, but then also responsible for projects, or responsible for business units, or responsible for budgets and clinical stuff. And so depending on where you're going, and then all of those managed care kind of things are really being applied in health systems. So if you really want to work in a health system, having some managed care background is beneficial as they are developing their own, ways that they're trying to bend the cost curve as more health systems take on risk and have different types of payment structures.
And it sounds like PharmD is like the place to look for how to reach a managed care. Like, what would you suggest?
Yeah. I mean, they're probably like the number one kind of organization that I would say for managed care. I'm also a member of APHA and ASHP. So those are all good organizations. ASHP recently started a specialty pharmacy kind of division. And so specialty is typically considered part of managed care. So if you're interested in specialty pharmacy, that would be another kind of good organization that has some exposure. But their specialty pharmacy is mostly focused as specialty pharmacy in health systems, which is kind of a new thing that's happening over the last few years, and it will continue to grow. And then, because usually specialty pharmacies are from a payer perspective, not necessarily a health system perspective. And but AMCP is going to be kind of your gold standard. I mean, and there's lots of different areas within AMCP. It's not just PBMs. There's also health plans, pharmas there as well, if you're interested on that side of managed care, being a liaison, speaking to managed markets. And there's so many different things that you could do.
I know we had June 26th, you have a special webinar coming up and kind of utilizing technology to improve healthcare.
Yeah, so we're doing a webinar with managed healthcare executives. So it's my boss and I, and we're talking about, so we have a product where we are able to, it's like a digital member engagement tool. So we're able to send text messages to patients once they opt in. We're not just blasting everybody. So if a member opts in, then we can send them text messages. So we'll say, hey, you're newly diagnosed. We see you might be a newly diagnosed diabetic. Would you like to receive weekly text messages letting you know about your disease state, so that the patients are able to get digestible information? So we send them, and it says, here's a link to the AADE self-care about nutrition. And here's the one about exercise. And so what it is just it's another tool. It's another way to consume media by a patient, where it's not just, all this information all at once where they become overwhelmed at the doctor's office. It's everybody has a cell phone. 92% of Americans have a cell phone, and they keep it on and close by. And so you get a text message, you might click on it and you might read it on your phone. And then the next week you get another one. So it's in this small digestible kind of amounts of data that is going to help you. And then there's also a way, if you'd like to talk to a pharmacist, click here. And so it directly connects to our well-managed, clinical pharmacists on the phone line. But then there's also other opportunities for that. It could also be, we use it right now a lot in our specialty pharmacy. So, hey, here, you're newly diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. Here's this information. Oh, you're newly on Humira. Here's a link to a YouTube video on how to give yourself an injection. If you have any other questions, you can call us, or hey, you can click here and you can connect to our web, or our video link to talk to a pharmacist if you have any questions after you've seen the video or whatnot. And so it's just a different way to communicate with patients that some patients are that are opting in or using to refill or to do whatever. And so we're very excited about that, because I think we're there's only a few PBMs that are actually doing that. So we're very excited about that and the great results, and patients really like it. So we've done some satisfaction surveys. Patients, our net promoter score is very high. When we do the word cloud on, in your own words, what do you want to say about our Well Connect? And they're like, the biggest word is ease, easy, great. So it's a lot of, it's a great tool to have. And so we're very excited on what else we can do with that tool.
That's exciting. Way to go, developing something different and unique.
Right. And that's something, so I need that clinical stuff because I need to know how to do the clinical messaging, right? So I lead the team that is putting together the Well Connect messages, and what are going to be our patient journeys, and what are we going to say in each of these journeys, and how do you phrase it so that it's easy to understand, but still is delivering that information. So
that's awesome.
I like it. I like it.
So much so many interesting things. Gosh, we could just talk forever.
Right.
But I guess we got to wrap it up. I know, Patty, you're busy and you've definitely got other things to do. So we will definitely, for our audience, put some information, contact information for Patty if you want to learn more, or any students are interested in residency info or other, even getting into the managed care world. We'll definitely leave some information below.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you. This is Bryn and Heather. We're Pharmacists Out of the Box.
Have a great week.
See you guys next time. Bye-bye.